Good morning to you, and welcome back to today's JRPG Weekly Update. I'm SuperDerek, and I've got some news for you guys today, specifically a lot of news about Eiyuden Chronicle. And I know I've been talking a whole lot about Eiyuden Chronicle lately, but I think today's episode is going to kind of be one of the few last remaining times I talk about it until the game probably comes out, or at least until some really big news starts coming out about it, which should be a while from now. The reason being is that Eiyuden Chronicle's 100 Heroes Kickstarter has finally come to a close, raising over $4.5 million. I remember last week I was saying, honestly, I really hope that they can hit 4 million. I don't even know why I want them to hit 8 times their original goal, but I hope that they do. And they actually crushed it at $4.5 million dollars raised, hitting nearly just shy of 900%, because their initial starting goal was a little over. It's like 500,000 and 510,000, something like that. That's incredible. Anyway, that is absolutely incredible. It's like 895% funded. That is so awesome. I am so glad that that game is being so well funded, and that Murayama is, clearly the Suikoden fan base is 100% behind this. I am so excited to see what comes of it. So along the way up to this 900% funded mark, they've actually hit 50 of their stretch goals, which is pretty amazing, each one unlocking a new game feature or new game mechanic. And at the $4.5 million mark, they actually unlocked a companion game. This is kind of interesting. It's not being made by Rabbit and Bear. They're going to contract it out to another company. It's a town building game that is going to be released prior to Eiyuden Chronicle, and it's apparently going to have some sort of save data that can be carried over or imported into Eiyuden Chronicle when Eiyuden Chronicle does eventually come out. And this is basically going to be kind of like a town building, farm sim, home building kind of thing that allows the player to collect minerals and build a farm, and basically all those materials at the end of the game is going to be transferable into Eiyuden Chronicle when that comes out. The companion game is being developed by NatsumeAtari, which is not to be confused with Natsume, which is the company that published like the Harvest Moon games here in the West. Not that Natsume. They're going to be basically working on this game in order to help keep the Eiyuden team focused on Eiyuden Chronicle, and I don't think any of us would want it any other way. And as a follow-up to last week, you guys asked a bunch of questions, what I should ask to Eiyuden Chronicle developers. Well, I had collected those questions and I sent them off and I got some answers, but we're going to talk about those a little bit later on. Before we do that, though, we've got some new games and ports to start talking about today, starting with, I think, some really great news, which is Final Fantasy Legend Collection was announced, or the collection of Saga Final Fantasy Legend. So these are 3 games, the original 3 Saga games that were released on the Game Boy, the original OG Game Boy. They were released in the West as Final Fantasy Legend 1, 2, and 3. All 3 of these games are being sold in a bundle on the Nintendo Switch for about $20, which is a lot less than the Collection of Mana, which is great, which is probably a really important thing as well, because I think 3 Game Boy games is a much more difficult sell than 3 Mana games. Like, Final Fantasy Adventure was a Game Boy original game, but then there was, 2 Super Nintendo games, one of which was Secret of Mana, which everybody loved, and then Trials of Mana, which was never officially released in the West. So there was like a whole lot of hype about that, and I don't suspect that the Saga collection is going to get the same amount of hype. So I think that $20, though, is fair for what we're getting here, because each of the Game Boy titles currently right now physically is selling for about $25 for just a loose cartridge. I mean, and like $100+ for, complete in box. The thing is, it's launching in December of this year, on the December 15th, and Japan is actually getting a special edition release without a game card, unfortunately. It's actually getting a physical release with no game card in the release, which is I mean, I get it that the cards are in and of themselves kind of expensive to produce, so I guess for a $20 game, it would really be hard to justify putting it onto a card. I mean, honestly, these are so small, these games. It's like you could fit them onto like a 1 megabyte flash drive or something like that. But maybe not 1 megabyte, but you know what I mean. Japan is not getting in their special release. If they're not getting a game card, most likely we're not getting a game card either. That kind of makes it a little bit harder to decide if I'm going to get that or not, but I still think I will. But I really wish I had a physical release. There's also another game that's coming out that was announced. It's actually already out. Takeshi and Hiroshi. It's a stop motion inspired RPG. Apparently it kind of shadow dropped on the Switch the other day. It's got that port over from the Apple Arcade where it was originally released. And based on the trailer that I see, the game looks like a really kind of wholesome, kind of uplifting, kind-hearted RPG that's kind of based on like the brotherly love. It looks like a really sweet RPG. Comes from a really good spot. The art style honestly doesn't really appeal to me so much, but I realize I'm, maybe in the minority on that. What do you guys think? And then also we got an update about that Kingdom Hearts rhythm game, Melody of Memory. Apparently that's going to be coming to Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. And that game is basically a rhythm-based game that's going to play over 100 songs, a huge song list, and it's going to be recapping a lot of stuff that happened throughout the previous chapters of Kingdom Hearts. And it's also going to contain what they call an all-new chapter. And if I know anything about Kingdom Hearts, it's most likely going to be integral to understanding the plot of Kingdom Hearts 4, so make sure you get that game so you don't end up being completely lost when the next entry in the mainline series comes out. And then we got some release date updates, starting with Ys 9 Monstrum Nox, which is, obviously that long-anticipated action RPG by Falcom. That's going to be occurring directly after the events of Ys 8, La Macrosa Abdana, which I did talk about. I reviewed that just over there. Yeah, over there I talked about that game. It was really great. And as a result, I'm excited as all heck for this upcoming PS4 launch on February 2nd in North America, the 5th in Europe, and the 12th in Oceania. It's also coming to Nintendo Switch later on and PC in summer of 2021. So less than a year from now. Also, we got a release date update for Genshin Impact on PlayStation 4. This is that open world online RPG from Chinese developer MiHoYo. Well, apparently the game's going to be a free-to-play RPG that contains in-app purchases, and it's launching with an optional $10 starter pack. Apparently, it's coming to PlayStation 4 on September 28th. However, we don't have any word on that Switch release just yet. And then also Yakuza Like a Dragon got a release date update. That's that turn-based RPG that's set in the Yakuza universe, and it's by Sega. Anyways, it's coming to PlayStation 4 on the 13th of November. And it's also coming to Xbox One and PC on the 13th of November as well. And also, it's going to be coming to the Series X and PlayStation 5 later on when those are out. So look forward to that. In SuperDerek news, last week I released a pretty interesting video, the Romancing Saga Primer. It is, I think, kind of a pilot episode of a potential series that I will be going into, talking about various games and how they evolve over time, their mechanics, what makes them unique, what makes them, who makes them. So my Saga series Primer apparently is doing pretty well, and it features my brand new set, which you can kind of see over here in the corner over there. I've been working on building that up for a good long while, building things from scratch, restoring things, and just kind of gathering little things from thrift shops to make this little corner of my in-home RPG tavern sort of deal. I love it. I love it so much. And I think you guys do as well based on your feedback, which is extremely exciting to me. And yeah, make sure you check out that video if you haven't already, if only to see that awesome studio. But also, it's all about the Romancing Saga series up through Romancing Saga 1, 2, and 3 on the Super Famicom, and Romancing Saga Reuniverse on mobile. So check out that video. And then in community news, Geofront, the fan translation people who are behind a lot of the really high quality stuff, the Tales from Zero, for instance, well, they're doing a translation of Tales of Azure, and apparently that is progressing quite nicely. The translation's rough draft is completely finished right now, so that means that they've still got a lot of editing to do, finalizing like the grammar and making sure things like tonally are correct. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but the rough draft is done, and they hope to be finished with that and getting into testing around fall based on the article that they released on their blog. Also, in the blog, they announced that they are now accepting submissions for chest messages, if you're familiar with the series. I've already submitted my worst pun, and I hope that you guys do as well, because what would a good extra chest message be without a terrible pun that makes you groan? And then in other news, Gamescom happened very recently, and there were actually a whole lot of retro-inspired indie RPGs that were shown off at Gamescom, so I only picked out 3 that I thought kind of stood out from the rest of the pack, so I'll just talk about those very briefly here. There's 8-Bit Adventure 2 from developer Critical Games. This is, as the name implies, it's very 8-bit inspired by like the NES era and the Sega Master System era of RPGs. I think that visually so far it looks really brilliant, but there's no real release date yet. And then Inkenfell from Happy Ray Games. This is a game that's inspired by the Mario and Luigi games series. Rest in peace. And features also a very similar visual aesthetic and timing-based mechanics during combat. That's going to be coming to PC on October 8th. And then also there's this one by developer Matthias Linda. It's called Chained Echoes, and it's being developed by just this one dude. And it was kickstarted for like 130,000 euro last year, I think. Anyways, it's still a ways off, but I think it looks gorgeous. It has some incredible pixel art. It's coming in late 2021. And that leaves us with this week's JRPG Weekly Forecast. So on September 1st, we've got Ari and the Secret of Seasons, which is a action-adventure game that's based on manipulating seasons in order to solve puzzles and stuff. It looks pretty cool. It's coming to PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, and PC. And then the next day on the 2nd, we've got Mask of Mists, which is a pretty fast-paced looking first-person action-adventure game. That's also coming to Xbox One and Nintendo Switch, but it's already launched on PC and seems to be pretty well received so far. And then on the 4th, we've got Doraemon, Story of Seasons. This is that series that was called Harvest Moon back in the day when it was released by Natsume for a while, and you know, back when the Harvest Moon games were actually good. Anyways, so now it's called Story of Seasons, and Doraemon Story of Seasons features that anime character from the Doraemon games. It's coming to PlayStation 4. It already launched on Switch back in 2019 and has been also pretty well received. And then that leaves us with today's not question of the week. What I would normally have here is a question of the week, but instead this is a follow-up to last week's question of the week, where I asked you for some questions to ask to the developers of Eiyuden Chronicle. And I took a lot of your questions and kind of tried to open them up a little bit to see what I could get them to tell us. And I'm pretty happy with some of the results. And then I also went ahead and just reserved one question just for myself because, you know. Here's the first question that I asked of Rabbit and Bear Studio. When you think of the medium and long-term future of Rabbit and Bear Studios, do you see possible follow-ups to Eiyuden Chronicle, or are you interested in branching out into other kinds of games? To which Murayama responded, "We don't want to put the cart before the horse, so all our energy is focused on making Eiyuden Chronicle a great game. That being said, if it is a success, I love expanding on the game worlds that I have built, so that would be a great next step." So it looks like he's hesitant to really commit to a sequel at this point, which is of course something that I suspected he would probably say. But they are definitely open to continuing to evolve the Eiyuden Chronicle world after this is released, if it is a success. And it looks like it's probably going to be a success. It's just a matter of seeing what actually comes of this, and we'll see where that road takes us, apparently. The next question that I asked him here is, are there any games or other media that you felt inspired by which have influenced this project? To which he responded, "When we saw the success a game with visuals like Octopath Traveler had, we were shocked. And of course, seeing the fact that the water margin story, which was the basis of Suikoden, continues to have fans was a big influence on us as well. So it looks like he was inspired by Octopath Traveler, which was kind of obvious before from the aesthetic of Eiyuden Chronicle, but it's not just the aesthetic that he was inspired by, but also the success that it had here that really inspired him to continue to make a retro style game. And then this is the question that I personally just had to ask, because I always kind of like getting a little bit of that extra background about the development, the history. I just wanted to know what brought about Eiyuden Chronicle as we know it today. So here's the question that I asked. Fans of yours have been dreaming of a project like this for years. Could you describe the events that led up to your decision to work together on this project? To which Murayama responded, over the recent years, several of the core members has started hanging out more and more. At one point, a few months ago, we said, why don't we work together and make the best game we ever had? What's stopping us? So we looked at our options and realized that crowdfunding would allow us to make the game we wanted without strings attached. It would allow us to communicate directly with real fans, so we decided to go that route, which I think was really awesome. It's awesome to hear that they were just kind of like friends hanging out beforehand, you know, just going out drinking and stuff, and then they're like, you know what? Why don't we just do this? We've been doing these games all this time. Why don't we work for ourselves and make something that we want to make? And that is really just the beauty of this whole thing. I just love the fact that they already were just hanging out and being friends beforehand. That makes me feel happy, and seeing the success that's coming of all of this, it's just great. So I hope you guys are happy with the questions that I asked, and I will talk to you guys next week. I am SuperDerek, and this has all been news to me. Have a great week, everybody.